This video is my 4-step drawing workflow to turn the sketch from this to this. I will show you my step-by-step method of using software such as Rhino 3D, D5 Render, and the Adobe Suite for producing my architectural drawings. My name is Thomas Rowntree. I'm an architectural designer and have a master's degree in architecture. By documenting my architectural journey, my content aims to share my experience and knowledge to help you guys through your design journey. If you enjoy my content, please hit that subscribe button, it'd be much appreciated, and make sure to like the video. My drawing workflow is simple but effective and has worked for me for the past 6 years as an architecture student. My drawings have a post-produced style where I layer the drawings in Photoshop and Illustrator. I like this layered look because it gives them depth and also style without them looking hyper-realistic. So my 4-step method begins with a sketch. Sketching allows to get my thoughts down onto paper and to begin to visualize what kind of drawing I want to produce. Often it is easy to get lost in a 3D modeling software, so I like to sketch out what the drawing I want to produce and how I want it to look. What are the key features that I want in the drawing? This particular project is a distribution facility on a container terminal in Antwerp port. So it's key to have a drawing showing the building operating on the port. So at this part, this is never a kind of crazy sketch or anything. This is something really quick just to outline what we want in the image. So the first thing that we'll do is simply outline the frame. So outline the area that we want to work with. And then what I'm going to do is just start mapping out the port edge. So roughly where the kind of port outline is going to be, indicating where the water line is. I'm just making some kind of marks here to show the water. And then placing my building kind of very central in the project. The various industrial spaces and existing warehouses, etc. And here you've just got a very quick sketch indicating the drawing that I want. And it just gets it down onto paper and it gets those thoughts down onto paper. And is a good first stage to producing the drawing. Step number 2 is to come into Rhino and to begin to turn that sketch into a reality. I use Rhino 3D to model my project and get it ready for exporting the line work and also adding materials, shadows, context, etc. in a rendering software. Okay, so now that we're in Rhino, you can see that I've got a very, very detailed model. This model has taken me months and months and months to build. It has really great detail for exporting all of my drawings when doing this workflow, bringing it into Illustrator, which is the next stage. And as you can see, all of the components are modeled and layered. Layering your model is really important because you can switch off certain features. So for example, if you've modeled everything in the water, or if you modeled everything as existing buildings or terrain, you can switch them on and off, which helps in terms of categorizing each component. But also when you're working through and you've got a very heavy model, switching those layers on and off can help just speed things up a little bit. Assigning a color to each layer will just help differentiate each component from one another and help you when you're adding materials in D5 Render. So the first thing I'm going to do here is trying to create some kind of shots based on the sketch that I've created with the key components that I want to show. I want to show the water, I want to show the port edge, and I want to show the building in context right in the center of the page. I mean, you can actually update this and adjust this live with D5 Render, which I'll show you in a moment. And then once you're happy with the shot, what I'm going to do is highlight the entire image. So typically I'd zoom out, highlight it, then go back into the named view, and then just type make 2D. And what's going to happen here is that all of those geometries and all of those surfaces are going to be turned into lines, into curves. You can then go over onto the top view and you can see all of the line work here. And you can see that it's holding all of the layers as well, so all of the colors are being maintained. And one thing that's really crucial here is to highlight each layer or each color that you have and make sure that you're assigning them to a layer. Because even though when you're extracting the 2D information from the 3D model, they don't maintain the layers. They maintain the color, but not necessarily the layers. So if you just select the layer that you want, like I'm doing here with the container yard, right click the layer that you want to select it to, and then just click change object to layer. And also you'll notice that a couple of things will probably need to be cleared up. Some of the geometry you might not be happy with. So for example here, something's obviously gone wrong with the model here. The roof is too high so you can see the inside of the building. So I'm just going to go through and delete some of the components and clean the model up, and you might find that there is some geometry that you're not happy with. And then the final piece of the puzzle is to once again highlight all of the line work and then type export. And what you want to do is export it as a DWG. So you can bring that into Illustrator and that will maintain all of the layers, all of the colors, all of the line work. And that makes it much easier for when you go into Illustrator to manage all the line works. Once the model is ready and all the line work is exported, I will then bring it into a rendering software. So today in this video, I'm going to be using a rendering software called D5 Render, which is a free tool for students. I like using this rendering tool because it produces some really high quality renders. It's really simple to use and it's free. I'm using the new 2.6 version, which has some great updates and has some amazing advanced features, including an optimized section tool and an AI transfer tool, which is pretty cool. You can apply for D5 education for free if you are a student or educator. When it comes to rendering for this specific project, all I'm going to be taking out of the rendering software is shadows. However, in a moment, I'm going to show you how to use the D5 render assets to create some really realistic renders. So when we dive into D5 Render, one tool that I absolutely love is this instant adjustment and synchronizing. So as you're working in Rhino, you can update your Rhino model, update the camera positioning, and it will automatically update in D5 Render. This is a live sync feature that I think works really well if you have a monitor and laptop screen, so you can work between the two. So to make sure that I'm happy with this render, I'm just gonna adjust the exposure, make sure the focal length is correct. So I always work with 35mm. I think the kind of depth of field works really well here. And then you can adjust all of the features in terms of the environment, the clouds, etc. I don't need to show any of that because it's obviously a clay model here, so you can't see any of that anyway. But you can adjust the rotation and angle of the sun for the different times of day, which I think is really useful. So I'm going to get it so the shadows are going over to kind of like the right hand side, which I think works really well. And once I'm happy with it, I'm just going to set it up as the aspect ratio of 3:2, I'd say. And then we're going to export in 4K, so we'll get a nice, good quality render. So to show you how you could use the assets in D5 Render, you can see here that my model has got all of the colors, you can see all the layers. And the reason why I mentioned this earlier is because you can differentiate the different layers, so you can add materials to each component of the project. And so I'm going to set up this view here, which shows the kind of driveway into my building. And you can kind of still see the facade running down into the distance, and you can see the components slicing through. And so this is a really nice kind of point of view to show the geometry, but also some context for my project. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start adding some materials to the building. So I'm going to give it some kind of the facade a nice dark material. I'm going to give it the timber a nice timber look, maybe this kind of walnut texture, and then add some kind of darker features to the building to make sure it kind of pops out. And then add the tarmac to the ground. And then the next thing I'm going to do is start adding some environmental conditions. So here I'm just adding some participation, so some water to make it like a rainy day. So here in this render, I want to show this kind of industrial feel that you're in a port. It's a very wet, windy, rainy area to work in. And so I'm showing these kind of rainy and windy conditions. To continue also my graphic style of that textured look in my drawings, I'm just going to show that here and show you how you can show that in a rendered style as well. So what I'm going to do here is add a road. So one of the features that you can use in the assets is this road. And what I've done here is I've duplicated the road components, grouped them together, rotated them. And so from this shot here now you can see that the road kind of continues into the distance. And then you can add features like street lights, which I think work really well in an evening scenario where you can add some kind of spotlighting down and you can get some nice effects on the water. You can add some trucks and vehicles. So I'm just going to add a range of trucks and vehicles here to show them kind of entering the building, and add an extra light. And then what I often do is I'll flick between the scenes and the model to see if I'm happy with the scene, because you don't want to be working a lot into the surrounding areas that aren't being focused on in the frame. So I want to make sure that I'm working within the frame and I'm not wasting time modeling things elsewhere. You can add decays to the road, which I think is a really nice feature. You can add potholes, which I think also looks really nice. It just gives it a little bit more character and context to the visual. And then I'm just going to add a bit of a car park. Obviously this isn't super accurate. This is just to show you how you can add these features. And you can see I'm just adding some trucks and also some more vehicles. So then when you come back to the shot, you can see the car park on the left-hand side, which I think works really nice. And it looks like you're driving into this industrial estate. And then what I'm doing here is I'm adding an environmental condition that they already have set up. So you've got these HDRIs, which you can set as a kind of really cloudy scenario. So if you can kind of go through these, you can have sunsets, you can have evening, sunrise. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add this cloudy environment, which I think works really nice. And you can you can see the fog and you can see the clouds in the distance. And then I'm going to add some spotlights because it's a bit of a darker scenario, just some really subtle spotlights into the image. You can also add these interior parallax, which show interior conditions. So for example, here I'm just adding like an office space. So like when you're doing the render, you can see at a distance, you've got these interior spaces behind my facade, behind the windows. So it looks like there's some kind of activity going on. And then you can add people with different kind of characteristics. So I've got like handheld people here with umbrellas. And you can see here when you go to the shop, you've got something that works really nicely. And then once again, you go over to render. I'm going to do a 3x2 render again, 4K, and you can render that and voila. You've got something like this, which I think works really well. You could then bring this into Photoshop and add some textures and overlay some more features. But you've got a really nice atmospheric drawing here. You can see the building, the nice black, I think works really nice because you've got the kind of reflective material to show the different kind of angled pieces. And then you've got the timber contrasting geometry slicing through the warehouse. And you've got the nice kind of rainy effect. And I think that works really nicely as a render. And this is definitely something that I can integrate into my workflow. If you want to get your hands on a 3-day free trial of D5 Render or 5% off your D5 Pro, follow the links down below in the description. You can get some discounts there. And I would definitely recommend checking out D5 Render. I think it's a really great rendering software that is free for students, remember, it's free. So yeah, check it out in the link down below. And step number 4 is the post-production phase, and this is where the magic happens. This is where you begin to layer the drawings in the Adobe Suite. So I use Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, and this is where the drawings will really come to life. So the first thing that I would do is open the DWG in Illustrator, and if you've corrected the right layers in Rhino, you will see that the layers will come through in Illustrator. And then what I'll do here is simply select each layer and change the line weights depending on what features I want to be more prominent in the drawing and what I don't. So for example, the building here, I want to be quite prominent. So that's the strongest line weight. But then you've got components like the cranes, or you've got the container yards, which you'd want to have a smaller kind of line weight because you don't want them to be too bold. So you want to really make sure that you're selective with the line weights, making sure the facade, for example, is a thin line weight because you don't want that to be too obvious. And just building up the drawing here. And what I'll do here is just spend a bit of time making sure that I'm happy with the line weights before saving this Illustrator file and bringing it into Photoshop. And then I would come into Photoshop, I'd set up my file. So as you can see here, I've got a 335mm by 594. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in the Illustrator file. So I'm going to copy and paste over the vector file and scale that up to something that I'm happy with. And one thing that you can do here is you can duplicate the file if you're not happy with the line weights and you want to make things heavier, you can duplicate them. And a really important thing to remember when producing these drawings is make sure that you're labeling your layers. Make sure that you've got your layers all set up. I make the mistake often where I don't kind of have any structure to my layering and it becomes a bit of a mess. The next thing is to bring in my shadows. So I'm just going to unlock that there. I'm going to bring that into my file. Scale it up to what I'm happy with. What you might have to do is drop that behind so you can obviously see the line work. And then you're just gonna have to make some adjustments and get it roughly in place. And then once you're happy with that, what I always do is I go over to adjustments and levels. And what I like to do here is I bring up the blacks to make the blacks slightly harsher so you've got more of a contrast, but bring down the whites. So bring down the grays. So you've got very strong blacks, but maintaining some of the grays in there. But having a nice white background to make sure the blacks and the shadows are quite prominent. And you've also got the grays that are kind of disappearing. So it's a black and white image in the end that becomes the kind of base of the drawing. So you've got the line work and then you've got the shadows. And that is the base, the core of my drawing. The next thing to do is start adding some textures to the drawing and start bringing it to life, giving it some context. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to add some tarmac. And as you can see here, I've got these assets already available, which I've saved as patterns, which is really useful. I'd recommend you saving these as patterns. So I'm just selected around the area, deleting any of the existing buildings or anything that I don't want to be filled with that pattern, just highlighting them out. creating a new layer, of course, and then filling that with that tarmac pattern. And then putting it behind the shadows, because obviously you want the shadows to be over the top, same as the line work. So bringing that down and then changing the shadows layering setting to multiply. And then you get something like this, and you can see that I've got a slice down here at the bottom that I'm not having included. That is actually because I'm going to be framing my drawing. So you're going to have some cinematic panels, so you won't actually be able to see that. So that's kind of reason why I haven't wasted my time adding that in, because I know that I'm going to be chopping that out. So now you've got the tarmac ready. I'm going to start layering the tarmac, because as you can see, it's a bit one-dimensional. It doesn't really show much context. Obviously the tarmac isn't all going to be one color, so I'm going to add some layers into it. And also with the container yard here, you can't really see it currently, so I'm going to delete those out as well and make sure that they're all white. So what I've done here is I've just overlaid a white texture over the top and just dropped the opacity to give you a slightly different tone of grey, a slightly different tone of tarmac, just to show the differentiating features. And the entrance to my building is quite important, so I wanted to emphasize that in this drawing here. And as you can see with the container yard, I've done them as all white, so that's overlaid over the top as well. So they're kind of popping a little bit more, they're a little bit more visual. The next thing to do is to do the water. And this water is really, really crucial to the style of the drawing, and giving it context, of course, but making sure that the graphic is right. So what I have here is these drawing assets, and I'm going to overlay these water assets. So I've got this really thick kind of choppy water. I've got slightly softer water, and then I've got this blue, which I'm going to overlay over the top. So it's really important to layer your drawings, not just do one component, because then it becomes quite flat. And so overlaying the drawings like this, for example, I'm going to just copy and paste this up. I mean, there's probably a better way of doing this with the patterns, but I don't have this as a pattern saved. I'm going to select around the areas of the port that the water that I want filling, inverting it, and then deleting the areas that I don't want. But as you can tell, the reason why I layer the drawings, as you can see here, this is just far too strong of a texture. You could drop the opacity, but what I like to do is just layer the drawings to give it that layered look. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the other drawing asset, layering it over the top, duplicating it across. And then you've got this layered look here where you can drop the opacity, you can obviously change the names, and then you've got a bit of a layered look over the top. But once again, the drawing here is still too flat, it's too black and white, there's not really much kind of character or style to the drawing. Obviously there's a very strong grey here, but water's obviously got a slight tint of blue. So what I'm going to do is select once again the areas that I want highlighting. So I'm just going to select the outside areas of the water, and I'm going to get this blue here, which I have saved in the assets once again, and I'm just going to do a stroke across the image to give this kind of gradient effect. So it's not a solid color, it's more of a gradient. And then I'm going to overlay this over the top using the layering tools. But you can see here, it just brings the drawing to life, in my opinion, straight away. With a very small touch of color, it just makes the drawing pop when everything else is in black and white. And so now I'm happy with the water. The water looks great, it shows the context, is really important to my drawings. The next thing I want to do is show some kind of activity and industrial feel to the project. I'm going to show some movements in the water where the boats are, and also I'm going to add some steam to show the activity to the industrial spaces that surround. So a good way of doing this is simply getting the pen tool, selecting white, bringing it down to a small line weight such as 10 pixels, and then kind of draw some kind of streaks that are coming out the back of the boat to show the kind of movement of the water that is being left behind as it's being moved. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to filter, I'm going to select blur and do motion blur. And what this is going to do is it's going to kind of blur the line weights, and it's going to create some kind of movement. And as you can see here, it works really, really well for this feature. You can obviously increase the motion, you can decrease the opacity as well, so it blends in a little bit better. But I think this is just a really quick, easy way of just showing some motion in the water, and it just shows some movement to the drawing, and everything isn't so static anymore. So going again, once again, to the assets, I've got these kind of clouds here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale these down, bring them into the file, scale them down, rotate them, and change the opacity and start layering them up to make it look like you've got some kind of smoke or some steam coming out of the building to show some activity. You've got to be careful here. I don't want the buildings to look like they're on fire and that they're burning. So I'm dropping the opacity, I'm changing the sizes and the layering options. And with a bit of time working on this, you can get something eventually that looks like this. And I think that works really well. Once again, shows some more depth to the drawing, gives some more character, gives some more atmosphere. And I want to do something similar with the clouds. So obviously this is quite a kind of distant perspective. And I wanted to show some depth in my drawing. And so what I often do in my drawings is have clouds in the kind of foreground of my drawing. As you can see here, I'm just going to layer in some clouds just to show some depth, show some perspective, and also once again adds more atmosphere. And then to frame the drawing, I'm going to add in the rectangle. So you can see here that chopping out the bits that I don't want in the image, and you've got this nice long cinematic look, which I think looks really nice. And a lot of my drawings in my portfolio have this cinematic look because I think it just makes the drawings pop a little bit more. It kind of speaks for themselves. If you've got a page by themselves that with a nice cinematic shot, I think it works really, really nicely. And then one final component to this drawing that I want to add is a kind of composite feature. So what I mean by composite is layering in a different type of drawing into the drawing to give it a little bit more depth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlay a site plan into this drawing, into the water, and give it a bit of a contrast, so a black and white contrast. So I'm going to add the site plan in. I'm going to invert the line works to white so you can see them on the water. And then I'm just going to drop the opacity. And then you've got something like this. And that is the drawing. That is my workflow. So it's fairly straightforward. I don't like to go too over the top in Photoshop. My style is to keep things quite simple, keep it post-produced, and I think that works really well. So that is my 4-step drawing process. Super simple, really simple and effective to get my drawings ready for a portfolio submission. If you enjoy my graphic style and wonder how I created that graphic style, I definitely recommend you check out my drawing and graphic workshops, which are linked down below in the description. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please smash that thumbs up button. Make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you next time. Peace.